do require that we get paid a tariff that is reflective of the cost that we incur in generating electricity. And we do this mindful of the strategic role that we play in the South African economy. If Eskom were to fail, it is clear that we will pose a very significant strategic risk to the country itself. And it's therefore one of our key priorities to ensure that we have a viable and sustainable power utility going forward. We are doing a lot of work to recover the stability of our generation system, and my colleagues to my left will address you on that topic a little later on. So I won't steal their thunder in that regard. Safe to say that we have stepped up our reliability maintenance program to the point where we now have some 14% of our units undergoing maintenance. And that is a very high number and is reflective of the seriousness with which we are tackling the reliability maintenance program. However, we can only fix so much. The average age of our power station fleet is some 39 years, and that means that a number of our power stations are reaching the end of their design lives. These design lives are further compromised by the fact that we have not done over the years on a number of our stations the midlife refurbishments that were required. And in accordance with IRP 19, which is stated government policy on the energy industry in South Africa, we will therefore take out of commission over the next decade between 8,000 and 12,000 megawatts of installed capacity. And that is obviously going to create a shortfall in generation capacity going forward. And it's against this backdrop of, on the one hand, fixing what we've got, but on the other hand also the looming shortfall in generation capacity that we're very grateful for NERSA's concurrence with Minister Mantashe's determination of a procurement process to add 11.8 gigawatts to the grid. We think that this is urgent. We welcome the fact that the Minister has now a number of times announced that he will make available the resources of his department to support and expedite this process, and we look forward to adding this capacity to the grid. We do think, however, that it's important that in this procurement process that we're able to collaborate, as we are already doing, with both the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy as well as the IPP office in order to ensure that any commercial or contractual issues are addressed early on, thereby enhancing the likely successful outcome of the procurement process. We need this capacity, and Eskom is prepared to work very closely with all role players in this regard to enable the successful addition of the capacity onto the grid. There's furthermore an ongoing emergency procurement of some 2,000 megawatts of generation capacity and the self-generation of power by industry as earlier announced by government. And these are necessary and much welcomed initiatives. We look forward to the rapid progress on the implementation of this, as again this will assist us in relieving pressure on our generation system, which is unreliable and unpredictable, and the more capacity that we can add to the grid in a short space of time, the lower the risk of load shedding will become. We continue to implement our turnaround plan, which is geared towards improving Eskom's performance to achieve sustainability and also to guarantee safe and secure supply of electricity going forward. In order to do this, a major component of our turnaround program has been to focus on repairing some of the design defects that are inherent in both Medupi and Kusile, and So far, the results that we have achieved from the very first unit where we implemented these design modifications after a 75-day outage, Unit 3 at Medupi, the results are very promising, and we believe that we are getting our arms around these design defects, and with these modifications we will be able to achieve design output, which in the case of Medupi is 793 megawatts per unit. For Kusile it's slightly higher, it's 800 megawatts per unit, and we will then be able to reliably run these units at their design capacity. It will take time. We are going to be completed with the Medupi process by the end of the current financial year, after which we will commence with doing the design modifications as required at Kusile. We've also managed to correct some of the design defects at Ingula, and we are now confident that that operation is running well. All of this will contribute to a step change in the availability of our generation system by April of next year. But this is not yet enough to eliminate entirely the risk of load shedding. There is also more work that needs to be done, but we anticipate that by September of this year we will have performed adequate reliability maintenance to have significantly reduced, but sadly not eliminated, the risk of load shedding going forward. We're also doing further work to extend the life of our nuclear power station Koeberg, the only nuclear power station on the African continent, for a further 2 decades. And the milestone achievement of the past months has been the arrival of the first of 6 new steam generators that are a critical part of converting nuclear energy into electricity. It's important to stress that the safety precautions that are in place at Koeberg are incredibly tight. Jan Oberholzer and I recently had the privilege of visiting Koeberg. We went into Unit 2, the reactor, which was then being refueled, so it was safe. And I can give you the personal assurance that the safety precautions are extremely.
I apologize for that. We were listening to Eskom's Group Chief Executive Andre de Ruyter briefing us on the Eskom's performance, overall performance, where they are with regards to the operational performance as well as the state of the system. You heard him talk about saying if Eskom fails, it will pose a strategic risk to the country. We have that feedback up. Let's take you back there live.
Electrostatic precipitators, but that's not enough. We can't entirely handle it. But in this process, we have recently managed to expand our ash handling capacity at the Camden Power Station, and that will in due course enable us to return some 1,000 megawatts to the grid. We're also committed to the flue gas desulfurization unit at Medupi, as is a requirement in terms of the funding agreement that we have with the World Bank, and we have issued a request for information to the market to gather more information about the potential technology solutions that are there. The wet flue gas desulfurization technology that is currently being proposed is very expensive. It is estimated to cost some 40 billion rand, and there is therefore a need for us to establish what the optimal point is where we can achieve appropriate environmental outcomes. On Tuesday, the 20th of October, Mr. Sekhamotso Skeepers, who's on the far left over there, he's the managing director of our transmission division, shared the Eskom transmission development plan. And you will have seen that in order to accommodate the expected construction of very substantial new wind and solar capacity in South Africa, we are going to have to spend in excess of 100 billion rand to strengthen and expand our transmission grid in South Africa over the next 10 years. This is an opportunity for us because it allows us to add capacity. It also allows us to participate in government's infrastructure development program, and in so doing create the opportunity to add jobs which are clearly critically needed by the economy at this point in time. On the distribution side of our business, we are concerned that there are continued illegal activities that affect our grid. At present, we are losing about 2.5 billion rand a year due to electricity theft, illegal connections, and meter tampering. Now, given the constrained state of the Eskom financial statements, you will understand that this is not a loss that we can accommodate. And we have therefore decided to implement load reduction during peak hours where illegal connections cause our local distribution grids to be overloaded, creating a risk of fires and even explosions at our distribution transformers. And in order to protect our assets, this is a step that we have had to take. It is regrettable, but it is unavoidable. For the past 5 years, from 2015, we've also suffered an extraordinary epidemic, I should say, of cable theft. We have had 1,458 incidents of cable theft per year. And this is causing us, only in terms of the asset value, some 50 million rand in losses per annum. But added, of course, to that is the lack of reliability in our system, the disruption to customers downstream of that cable theft, which causes us to then have to go out and repair. So clearly there is a need to combat the scourge of cable theft and infrastructure theft in particular, which is now increasingly also starting to affect our transmission grid. We continue to work closely with law enforcement agencies in this regard, but we would also urge all South Africans to act as our eyes and ears when you see incidents that look suspicious to you. Please report them to your local police station or to Eskom, that we can act on this and make sure that together we can protect our national assets. At the same time, it is very important that all consumers in South Africa pay for the electricity that they use. And this applies to the municipalities to whom we supply, as well as to consumers whom we supply directly. And again, we urge all South Africans to pay for what you consume. In this context, it is clear that municipal debt for electricity sales still poses a major challenge. At the end of August 2020, the arrear debt by municipalities was at 31.4 billion rand. Again, a very large number, which is clearly not sustainable. And that leaves us with no option really but to take assertive steps to arrest the further accumulation of additional debt, but also to recover this overdue debt. And it therefore gives us no pleasure, but we have no option to accelerate this debt recovery process by the attachment of bank accounts, the seizure of assets, obviously under court order, belonging to defaulting municipalities. And that's part of our intensified efforts to collect this debt going forward. We're also pleased at a verdict that was recently issued by the South Gauteng High Court, which confirmed the lawfulness of Eskom's approach when it dismissed with costs a consumer's, a large industrial company's bid to compel Eskom to continue to supply electricity to its premises, even when the Eskom customer, in this case the Walter Sisulu municipality, had failed to honor its obligations to pay Eskom for that electricity. So very pleased with that precedent that has now been set, and we intend to use that precedent going forward. We remain committed to ongoing engagements with government and also other stakeholders, including the municipalities in question, to find a sustainable solution to this problem of municipal debt. And in this instance, I have to thank the Deputy President for his leadership of the political task team, which has been very strongly focused on addressing the issue of municipal debt, and the support for Eskom's actions from the political task team have been very welcome and of great assistance in allowing us the space to do what is required. Our ultimate goal is to achieve operational sustainability and thereby reduce the risk of load shedding. And we believe that by a disciplined but also a collaborative approach, relentless focus, and the courage to make tough decisions will enable Eskom to reliably provide electricity to power a growing economy, but also to enable increasing private sector investment in new generation capacity as we pursue the restructuring of Eskom. And in this context, the legal separation of our transmission business, which will become a wholly owned subsidiary under Eskom Holdings SOC, is a key milestone that we are working very hard towards achieving as a catalyst to unlocking additional private sector investment in generation capacity. Now, this is an important step because it allows us as Eskom, as a buyer of electricity, to give private investors the confidence that there will be no leakage of sensitive commercial information between Eskom generation and bids that they put into the power market. And therefore this separation is a key step towards solving our electricity capacity challenges going forward. Before I call on our Chief Operating Officer, Jan Oberholzer, to address you, I would like to express my gratitude to Eskom's staff across all 9 provinces of South Africa, who have continued to go beyond the call of duty in their endeavour to serve South Africa within the constraints imposed on them by this pandemic. And this is the true embodiment of a values-driven organisation, and I thank you for that. At this point, it's also appropriate to pause and reflect on the fact that 27 Eskom employees and 2 contractors have lost their lives to the pandemic over the past 6 months. And this is, of course, a very sad consequence of the coronavirus. Lastly, I want to thank the Minister of Public Enterprises for his continued support, and also our board, who have given management the space and the leadership to turn the Eskom ship around. It is a big ship. We are turning around. It is probably slower than most South Africans would have wanted, but we are definitely making progress, and it's pleasing to see the green shoots of recovery starting to emerge. I would like to thank our customers, our stakeholders, and all South Africans for continuing to heed the call to use electricity sparingly and wisely. And on that note, I'm going to hand over to Jan to take you through the system update. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you. Thank you, Andre. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my honor and privilege today to again give you an overview of how the system is performing. So how do we do in terms of our generation, transmission, as well as distribution operations, as well as to give you a little bit of an overview on the group capital. So then I will be followed by my colleague Rulani Matabula. He's acting generation executive. He will then deep dive into the generation side of the business and focus specifically on the 9-point plan that is quite familiar to all of us. And then Segomotso will come, our MD for transmission, and he will give us an outlook on the system looking forward. So when we had the lockdown end of March, in the beginning of April, obviously we had quite a reduction in the demand for our product. And that then allowed us the opportunity to do quite a number of what we call short-term emergency maintenance activities. So, and specifically focusing on what we call the partial load losses. And I'll come to a slide a little bit later that it's graphically illustrating what I'm talking about. So, and we believe that close to 2,000, maybe a little bit more, of 2,000 megawatts of recovery, sustainable recovery, we did achieve during that period. However, when the lockdown then reduced, obviously positive for the economy and all of us, down to level 1 where we are now, we had quite an increase in the demand that is very close to where it was before the lockdown. And that obviously brought along, the pressure on the system. So we saw a reduction in our availability. And then also, unfortunately, we saw an increase in the usage of burning diesel to make sure that we supply in the demand of the country. And one would ask, but why? And I think we're not even close out of the phase of having that we unreliable and unpredictable our generation system. So, and I'll deal with that a little bit later. So we must understand, because we are where we are, we unfortunately have to rely on using quite a lot on our emergencies, and that is burning diesel. And, if you look at Eskom's financial situation, we actually, it is a difficult challenge that we do have. However, unfortunately, during this increase in demand from the country, we had to implement load shedding. And that happened in July, as well as August and September. And I've decided to put down some key points on specifically what contributed over and above the unpredictable and unreliable system that we have. So we also had lots of trips because of the unreliability that we had to deal with. Just as an example, last weekend, again we had 4 or 5 units that just tripped over the weekend. And we had to deal with that during this week. And I'm sad to say that we had to burn a lot of diesel on Monday, Tuesday, and yesterday. Today we seem that we have recovered quite positively. But this is where we find ourselves, unfortunately, with the system that we currently have. However, we also had to shut down Camden. I think it was late April, because of the risk, the safety risk on the Ash Dam. So completely shut down. So there we lost 1,300 megawatts. At Kuburg, I'm proud to say Kuburg came back yesterday morning, unit number 2 at 20 to 3. Successfully, so the first 24 hours we managed to ramp up to 30 megawatts, and now we will steady take it further. So, but that was 1,000 megawatts. That was also not available. And then our commercial units at Medupi as well as Kusile, during this period, we had some of them, specifically the non-commercial units that we're still doing capabilities testing on, that were not available. And you will see moving forward, when we solve all the latent defect, the design issues that we do have at the new power stations, when those 2 power stations, which is close to 10,000 megawatts, is performing the way we want it and the way that we've planned it, investor in it, we will move quite a way towards getting out of this phase and the risk of load shedding. Because whenever these 2 units, these 2 power stations perform well, it relieves quite a lot on the rest of the system. However, during this period, remember our commitment in the beginning of the year, as well as in May when we had the media briefings, we said we are going to do reliability maintenance. What we haven't done the last 10 years, we are now committed, and that's what we're going to do, because that is a way that we can bring these old units back to a reliable state that is sustainable, that will provide you sustainable performance. So where we started in the beginning of the year with about 3,000 megawatts of planned maintenance, we've stepped it up, and we're just below 6,000 megawatts at this point in time. And if you look at percentage, out of the 100%, we've moved up from the 8%. On average, we're now at 10% maintenance. But a few days ago, the Chief Executive and myself were talking about it, and it was 14%. So we're really doing a lot of maintenance. So when the system allows us, to do even more maintenance, we make use of the opportunity to do exactly that. And that is a way that we will get our system again reliable. However, it is important, and I want to emphasize this fact again, that we're doing a lot of maintenance. So I believe we will see the first step change in April, end of April next year. But the risk, and then it will, I believe, improve up until the end of the winter period in 2021. However, up until then, the risk of load shedding remains. And I would like to emphasize this point. Unfortunately, that's where we find ourselves, and up until we had the opportunity to do adequate reliability maintenance and do midlife refurbishment, and we believe that we will get to a much better position end of winter in 2021. The risk, unfortunately, of load shedding remains. So we continue to put a lot of focus on Medupi and Kusile in terms of the design modifications, the implementation thereof, and I'll deal a little bit in detail in some later slides. Transmission network performance, a very positive improvement. Where we had significant challenges last year, there has really been a significant improvement in the reliability of our transmission electrical network. And then our customers, and this is on the distribution side, also continue to experience less frequent interruptions. And obviously, what is also positive is the restoration time. Should there be a power interruption, how long does it take to restore the power? A very positive improvement on that as well. However, we continue to request the public of South Africa to reduce demand. If you don't need to switch on a light or a plug or a swimming pump, please don't do that, because we are still constrained as we speak. And so please, we are relying on you to assist and to contribute in order to make sure that the risk of load shedding becomes less. And then obviously, it goes without saying, we regret the inconvenience that we do cause when we do have to, unfortunately, implement load shedding. I'd like to dive now into some of the operations and give a little bit of more detail. Let's start with Koeberg, the nuclear performance. Solid performance, safe performance. We've established in the year, it's about a year now, an independent external nuclear oversight body, which comprises of international specialists. So they had their second oversight audit. And the feedback is we are running Koeberg safely. So I'd like to emphasize and I'd like to congratulate my colleagues down in Koeberg as well as in the operating nuclear unit for running a very safe operation. If you look at availability, 81.35, that's above the target we've set ourselves. Trips, we had no trips since the beginning of the financial year. Then the forced loss rate, that is basically reliability. As soon as you bring a unit back, how reliable is it? You measure that loss rate. So we set ourselves a target of nearly 2.5%, so we're running at 1.7. And earlier the Chief spoke about the steam generator project. So the first one, the first unit, unit number 1, we will replace 3 of the steam generators. Around about the first quarter of next year, we believe our readiness at this point in time is relatively high. Although I'm still nervous, and I'll spend some time with the team next week on site, because it's a massive project. It is a significant project, and we need to make sure that we're successful, because we rely on the successful implementation of all the steam generators, 6 of them, 3 each unit, together with, that's the next point there, the long-term operation readiness to be able to obtain the 20-year life extension license. So, as I said earlier, yesterday morning, unit number 2 successfully returned to service. And I believe that you can remember in September, it's not on the slide, but in September we had an earthquake down in Cape Town, which measured 2.7 on the Ruyter scale. Now, Kuiberg is designed for 7 on the Ruyter scale. But it doesn't stop, so it's designed and built for that. But over the years, we have made a number of improvements on the system to ensure, the resilience is much higher. So I'd just like to mention that as well. But I would like to really congratulate all my colleagues within the nuclear environment for doing a sterling job. So please keep it up. If I look, that I've just spoken about, if I look at new build, as the Chief has said earlier, Medupi Unit 3 was the first unit that we subjected to the design modifications. We're in the assessment period, evaluation period now. That takes usually about 6 months. However, all the indications are that it is extremely successful. We have then also subsequently done the same modifications on unit number 4, unit number 1, and 2 days ago, unit 4 returned as well. So 4 of the 6 units at Medupi, we have done these design modifications. So there are 2 units that is left. Also important for the public is the 6 units at Medupi, 5 already in commercial operation, and the last one, unit number 1, we'll have it in commercial operation early next year. So then we'll have a fully commercial operational power station next to Matimba. At Kusile, of the 6 units, 1 is in commercial operation. Then we have 2 units, unit number 2 and number 3. They already synchronized to the grid, and we plan to have them into commercial operation before the end of our financial year, which is in March next year. So by March, the end of the financial year, we believe we'll have 9 out of the 10 units in commercial operation. The only thing else I can add basically on this slide is we will only start next year with the design modification implementation at Kusile. So we first want to finish Medupi, and as soon as we've done with Medupi, then obviously the resources are utilized at Medupi, then we will come over to Kusile. But there is continued focus, dedicated focus, in making sure that these 2 vital power stations, which the economy of South Africa relies on, is firing on all the cylinders. Thanks. Then also, I'd like to congratulate my colleagues within this group capital environment for really a sterling job, and especially under a very difficult situation the last 6 months, with COVID. As we speak, we have all the contractors on site, and we make sure that we take note of this pandemic and that we deal with it effectively. Transmission, good performance. The system and its lost. We're way ahead of what we set at the target ourselves. That's the liability of our electrical network. Maintenance, if you take, this is also during the COVID period, 96%, well done. However, we had 2 major incidents where we only set ourselves a target for 1. Earlier, the Chief Exec referred to, the issue of theft and vandalism on our electrical network, specifically on the pylons, and in the substation where you also have the steel. It's amazing what innovation, the innovation of people. You use these members of the towers and some of the structures in the substation to make some very strong beds. So we are dealing with that. We have identified the high-risk areas, and we put remedies in place to deal with that. But a really sterling performance from our colleagues in transmission, and I'd like to thank them and say to them, well done for good performance. On the distribution side, also good performance. Electrification, we're well ahead of the number of electrification connections that we set ourselves a target, so we believe that we will, by the year end, achieve our target. Planned maintenance, the same comment during COVID. The colleagues have managed to do a lot of maintenance, commendable. We've spent well on refurbishment to make sure that our electrical network is well looked after. And then your duration and the frequency of interruptions, also very positive performance. And those targets that is referred to in terms of duration as well as frequency are world best. So we are really doing extremely well. And we've spoken earlier about the restoration time. But also theft and vandalism, where we have the same challenge on this side of the business because it's part of the wires business. So I'd also like to thank all my colleagues in the distribution environment for a sterling job. Please keep up the work. Then we come to generation, and all of a sudden here we see a lot more red than green and yellow. But we all know where we are. But we also know how we got here. And before I carry on, I'd like to really say to the colleagues within generation, they are working very long hours. They're under extreme pressure, but they are delivering. And for that, I and the whole of EXCO, we are extremely proud of each and every one of our colleagues in generation. And we are fully confident that we will turn this around. We just need time. So it's important for me to say this to my colleagues in generation. Okay, so the EAF, I'll give a slide just now, is not where we want it. We want it to be at 70%. We're down at 68. But then, if you look at the maintenance side of it, the PCLF, we're 2% better. So it's more important for us to put the focus on the planned maintenance. Yes, we would like the EAF to be higher, but that's where the focus is. Not that the focus is not on dealing with the unplanned and the trips and slips, and I'll deal with the slips just now. So we had more trips than we targeted for. Our unplanned load losses is not where we want it. It's very high at 18.6%, so there's an ongoing focus in dealing exactly with this. There you can see we planned for 8% in terms of planned maintenance. We're standing at 10, and as I said earlier, some days, some weeks, we're at 14%. And then I have spoken about the burning of diesel, unfortunately, at our two open cycle power plants down at Ruyter as well as at Ankerlig. So this slide basically just want to demonstrate, showing you if you take the full capacity as 100, where we stand in terms of the energy availability. That's a dark blue. Then the gold portion, you can see, is the planned maintenance side. Then the very light blue is the unplanned. That's where the focus is, to reduce that, as well as the gold bar. And then that small little blue, dark blue on top is what we say other. That may be because of poor coal quality, etc. So this just gives you an indication on, over time, the performance of our generation fleet. This is an important slide to demonstrate that we are doing a lot in terms of reliability maintenance. If you look, the slide starts there at when the lockdown started. Remember I said we had the opportunity to do a lot of short-term maintenance, and that little gold bar, or dark grey, whatever you want to call it, you can see we've done much more short-term maintenance. And as the lockdown changed to provide us opportunity to do reliability maintenance, you can see the dark blue has now picked up. And if you look where we're standing now, it's in excess of 5,000 megawatts. So this is just to demonstrate to you that swing from initially when we had the lockdown, stage 5 or level 5, we only could do, the short-term maintenance, but now we've changed it around, and there's a lot of focus on the long-term planned maintenance, reliability and mid-life refurbishment. This graph is just demonstrating, if you can recall, I just quickly want to go back, that little light blue, the unplanned side of the business. So to break it down, that's what I want to demonstrate here. So outage slips. It is for me personally a concern. Where we say and we commit to our production team, we're going to take 20 days. And then it takes 25 days. So there's a big focus on to get that right. Because the whole production plan is based on what the maintenance regime is saying when we will bring a unit back. So that is a significant, although it's only 500 megawatts, it's a significant impact. That is 3 open cycle gas turbines. And you know as well as I do, if you run an open cycle gas turbine, you burn 14 liters of diesel a second. So that is something that we need to get our hands around. And then you can see the partial load losses, still significant, 3,600. But I just wanted to, and then you can see Camden there as well. That contributed quite a lot, the 1,100 megawatt approximately. So this was just to demonstrate that unplanned portion of our network. This for me is an important slide. I've used 10 years to show how the EAF, if you look at the line, the blue line, how the EAF, the energy availability, came down. But then there was an increase in 17-18 from 68 to 75, and this is only coal related, so I didn't include peaking as well as nuclear. Then there was that jump from 68 to 75%, and then going down again. And if you really then look at the bars at the bottom, then that is your planned maintenance. So you can see, if you don't do maintenance, your availability comes down. And when we did quite a lot of maintenance in 14, and 15, and 16, and 17, you had quite a nice jump in the availability of the plant. And then we stopped doing maintenance again, and the picture is telling its own story. This is why I'll come to a slide a little bit later, which is absolutely speaking to this slide. And then on top, that gold bar, it's important to take note of this one as well. We call it the energy utilization factor, and that means how hard are you running your plant when it is available. So we have old plant that is 40 years old. We haven't maintained it properly. We haven't done mid-life refurbishment, but we're running it extremely hard because of the demand of the country, the demand. So if we then just keep this in our head and we go to the next slide, if you look at the dotted lines, and I will just concentrate there on the blue dotted line. So that gives you the energy utilization of our plant, which is high. It's in the high 80s or in the 80s. And if you then look at the dark lines, that is the European benchmark. So this demonstrates to you that we're running our plant much harder when it's available than the industry benchmark as it's indicated here in Europe. I'd like to end my presentation with this slide, and it's saying to me basically everything. It's saying, very simple warning, if you don't schedule time for maintenance, your equipment will schedule it for you. It is, sometimes, such simple little things, but sometimes you tend not to give attention to simple little things. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you. This is basically my portion of the presentation. I'd like to hand over to the acting Group Executive of Generation, Rulani. So please, thank you.
Eskom's a big ship, but we are turning it around. Words from Mr. Andre de Ruyter there saying if Eskom fails, it will pose a strategic risk to the country. The group chief executive Andre de Ruyter briefing us on the quarterly state of the system. Eskom's management there, Jan Oberholzer, the team also providing details with company's operational performance. De Ruyter talking about adding capacity to the grid that will lower the risk of load shedding. He spoke about Medupi as well as Kusela power plants and that the design modifications, and he was talking about that they are getting their arms around the design defects. So I guess that's promising. Medupi, we're told, will be completed by the end of the current financial year. But one of the issues that that stood out during de Ruyter's talk was theft and vandalism, which remains a major concern to operations and the reliability of supply to customers. De Ruyter spoke about how much they lose due to, among other things, illegal connections. Millions of rands a year, they say. So load reduction has been implemented, and he urged South Africans to pay for what you consume. The Eskom COO, Jan Oberholzer, they're speaking about their commitment to do reliability maintenance, but emphasizing that the risk of load shedding remains. We're going to keep a close eye on that briefing. We'll bring you some of the bigger takeaways during the course of today's program.